There's a type of conversation that never truly ends. It happened days ago, maybe weeks ago, but it lingers in some quiet corner of your mind. You return to it when you're alone, when the noise dies down, when nothing demands your immediate presence. And there is again word for word, ton for ton Kennery's. Most people won't admit they do it. It seems strange to confess that you keep responding to something that's already been said, adjusting phrases that have already come out of your mouth, imagining different versions of a moment that can no longer be changed. But it happens. It happens more often than anyone would like to admit. If any part of this feels familiar to you, you're not alone. And if you ever feel like sharing your experience, the comments are open, because replaying conversations in your head isn't madness. It's just the mind trying to organize something that was left unresolved. It's a silent way of processing what the body hasn't yet been able to let go of. And perhaps, deep down, it's also a discreet attempt to rewrite what you would have liked to say but never did. Repeating an old conversation as if there were still time to say something different. There are conversations that end but don't truly conclude. They linger somewhere between what was said and what should have been said. You leave the room, hang up the phone, close the door, but the conversation continues. Only now it happens on its own, inside your head, where no one else can hear. And you return to it like someone returning to a crime scene, searching for traces of what went wrong. Repetition isn't random. You don't relive the entire conversation, only the moments where something got stuck, where a word came out wrong, where the silence was too heavy. It's at these points that the mind insists on pausing, rewinding, trying again, as if there were a better version hidden somewhere, waiting to be found, as if repeating were a way of correcting the past without admitting that it's already gone. It's not nostalgia, it's not longing, it's something more restless, more urgent. It's the feeling that there's still time even knowing that there isn't. It's the brain refusing to accept that certain things remain forever the way they were said. So you repeat and repeat until the conversation stops hurting, or until you get tired of trying to fix it. Meanwhile, life goes on, but you get a little stuck in that moment, adjusting phrases that no one else will hear, mentally adjusting one's own words, searching for the version that would sound strongest or most accurate. After the conversation ends, the editing process begins. You revise your own words as if revising a poorly written text, searching for where you could have been clearer, firmer, more truthful. The sentence you uttered seemed right at the time, but now in the silence. It's unduik, incomplete, insufficient. You need to rewrite it mentally until you find the version that should have come out of your mouth. It's not just vanity. It's an honest attempt to regain control over something that slipped away. You want your words to have weight, to convey exactly what you felt. But in the moment, under pressure, with the other person's eyes on you, something less came out. Something that didn't fully translate the truth. So you go back, adjust, improve, as if the mental version could somehow replace the real version. The problem is that the more you adjust, the further you get from what really happened. The original conversation dissolves, giving way to this new version, more polished, fairer, more yours. And part of you starts to believe that's what you said, that those better words really came out of your mouth, that the conversation was different from what it was. But deep down, you know you're rewriting something that's already been written. And maybe that's why you can't stop. Imagine the other person's reaction changing, finally understanding what they didn't understand before. Sometimes the problem isn't what you said, it's what the other person didn't understand. So you go back to the conversation and change the script, not of your words, but of their response. You imagine their face changing, their expression softening, their gaze finally grasping what you were trying to convey. And in this mental version, everything makes sense. They understand, they see, and you feel, for a moment, the relief you didn't have in the real conversation. It's a silent, but necessary fantasy, because when someone doesn't understand you, something is broken. Not just communication, but the feeling that you matter, that your words have some power. So you recreate the scene. You put understanding where there was resistance. You put acceptance where there was indifference. And for a few seconds, inside your head, you achieve what you couldn't achieve in real life. But that version never leaves the imagination. The other person continues their life unaware that you're still talking to them, still hoping they'll understand something they may never understand. And you're stuck between two realities, the one that happened where you weren't heard, and the one you created where you finally were. And in the middle of the two, there's a question you don't ask out loud. Was the problem in how you said it, or in how he chose to hear it? To relive the silence between sentences, trying to decipher what was never said. What matters most in a conversation isn't always the words. It's what gets trapped between them. That second that lasted too long. The pause before the answer. The gaze that looked away just when you needed it to stay. And then, alone, you return to those silences like someone searching for clues in an empty place, trying to understand what was happening there in that soundless space. You repeat the scene, but this time you don't hear what was said, you hear what wasn't. The hesitation, the change in tone, the sentence that died before it was born. And each silence becomes an encrypted message, a code you try to break, because silence is never neutral. It carries everything the person chose not to say, and you want to know what it was. But deciphering silences is a dangerous game. You can fill the voids with your own insecurities, with fears that perhaps didn't even exist on the other side. You can transform a common pause into rejection, a second of doubt into contempt, and the more you revisit these silent moments, the more meaning they gain until the silence becomes more important than anything that was said. And perhaps that's what bothers you most. Not what you heard, but what you'll never be sure if you heard or just imagined. Go back to the conversation to confirm whether the mistake was real or just perceived. There's a difference between making a mistake and thinking you made a mistake. But in your head, after everything is over, that line disappears. You go back to the conversation not to correct it, but to investigate it, to check if you really said something wrong or if you just felt you did, because sometimes the mistake isn't in the words, it's in the feeling that lingers afterward. You relive the moment trying to be fair to yourself. You analyze the tone you used, the expression you made, the timing of the sentence. You look for evidence that you failed, but you also seek absolution, because if you can prove to yourself that you weren't wrong, maybe you can erase that strange feeling that's stuck in your chest. Maybe you can forgive yourself for something that, deep down, you don't even know if you did. But the more you investigate, the less certain you are. Memory begins to blur with interpretation. What was clear becomes doubt. What was doubt becomes guilt. And you get stuck in a loop where you can neither confirm nor rule out the mistake. You only feel that it exists somewhere between what happened and what you fear might have happened. And perhaps the real burden isn't the mistake itself. It's the inability to be certain, to know clearly whether you should regret it or simply move on. Using repetition as a discrete form of emotional self-correction. Repeating the conversation isn't just reliving the past. It's trying to reorganize something that's become a mess inside. Each time you go back to that moment, you're not trying to change what happened, you're trying to change how you felt. As if, by replaying the scenes, you could adjust the emotion that came with them. Transform shame into dignity, anger into clarity, confusion into understanding. It's a silent process of self-correction. You don't talk about it with anyone. You don't ask for help. You don't explain. You just mentally go back to the point where something went wrong and try to feel differently this time. You try to imagine a version of yourself that reacted better, that wasn't shaken, that remained calm. And little by little, this mental version begins to compete with the real version until you no longer know which of the two actually happened. It's not dishonesty, it's emotional survival, because some conversations leave marks that time alone cannot erase. And if the mind can rewrite how you felt at that moment, perhaps it can also rewrite how you feel now. Perhaps it can transform a wound into a scar. But there's a cost. The more you try to fix things internally, the further you get from what you actually experienced. And at some point, you realize you're carrying two versions of the same conversation and neither of them leaves you in peace. Rehearsing answers that will probably never be used. After the conversation ends, the rehearsal begins. You construct phrases you'll never say, arguments you'll never use, responses that came too late. Not because you believe you'll have another chance, but because you need to know that these words exist, that you are capable of formulating them, that if you could go back, you would know exactly what to say. It's an almost obsessive mental exercise. You test different tones, different angles, softer versions and harsher versions. You rehearse as if there were a scheduled presentation, as if at some point you would need these lines ready. But deep down you won't. You know that conversation is over, that the moment has passed, that those words will die in the silence of your head. Still, you continue, because rehearsing isn't about the other person, it's about you. It's about proving to yourself that you weren't left without an answer, that you weren't caught off guard, that you had something to say, even if you never say it. Even if those perfect words remain stored away, like weapons you never used. And perhaps that's what hurts the most, not the lack of opportunity, but knowing that you had the right answer, you just didn't have the right moment to use it. Reopening the dialogue in the mind to alleviate a tension that time has not resolved. Some conversations end, but the tension doesn't. It stays, stuck somewhere between your chest and throat, waiting for resolution. You try to ignore it, trito mouvant, but it always comes back whenever you let your guard down. So you mentally reopen the conversation, not because you want to, but because you need to. Because the mind doesn't accept incomplete things. It doesn't accept knots that have been left untied. You return to the dialogue as one returns to a wound. You poke, examine, try to find the exact point where the tension began, and you replay the scenes in the hope that this time something will be resolved, that the words will fit together better, that the misunderstanding will dissolve, that you will finally feel that relief that didn't come in the real moment. But mental relief isn't real relief. You can rewrite the conversation 1,000 times in your head. You can imagine reconciliations, clarifications, apologies, but when you open your eyes, the tension is still there because it doesn't reside in the conversation. It resides within you, and no amount of mental simulation can dissolve something that only a real conversation could resolve. So you get stuck between the impossibility of going back and the inability to move forward without a solution. And the mind keeps reopening the dialogue, trying to do alone what only two people could do together, confusing memory with imagination until the two seem the same. The more you replay a conversation in your head, the more it changes. Small details begin to alter a gesture that may not have happened, a tone of voice you're not sure you heard, a pause that may have lasted a second or 10, and gradually the line between what was real and what you imagined begins to disappear. The two versions blend until they become indistinguishable. You don't do this on purpose. It's just that memory doesn't work like recording, it works like reconstruction. Each time you access a memory, it's reassembled with new pieces. And if you return to the same conversation repeatedly, you add layers words. Interpretations become facts. Assumptions become certainties. And what was memory becomes narrative, a story you tell yourself until you completely believe it. The dangerous thing is that you start reacting to the imagined version as if it were the real one. You feel anger about things that may not have been said. You hold grudges about intentions that may never have existed, and the original conversation, the one that actually happened, becomes increasingly distant, buried under all these layers of repetition and reinterpretation. And when someone reminds you of what was actually said, you're surprised, because the version that lives in your head seems more true than the one that was actually recorded. Keeping the conversation alive internally because shutting it down externally was too difficult. There are conversations that end without truly concluding. They end due to circumstance, exhaustion, lack of courage, but not through resolution. And when something ends like that, incomplete, the mind refuses to accept it. So you keep the conversation alive inside. You keep responding, you keep arguing, you keep searching for the closure that never came, because letting go without resolving seems impossible. It's a silent form of resistance. You couldn't truly end the conversation. You couldn't say everything you needed to. You couldn't hear what you wanted to hear. You couldn't reach a meaningful conclusion. So you pretend it's still happening, that there's still time, that somewhere in that mental space where no one else can enter, the conversation remains open, waiting. But keeping something alive inside while it's dead on the outside takes its toll. You're torn between two worlds, one where the conversation is over and you should move on, and another where it never ended and you're still stuck in it. And the more time passes, the heavier it becomes, because you know you're holding on to something you should have let go of. But letting go would mean accepting that certain things will never be said, and that hurts too much, so you hold on. And you repeat, and you keep alive a conversation that should already be buried, because sometimes ending something internally is even harder than ending it externally. Repeating conversations in your head isn't a sign of weakness. It's not obsession. It's not an inability to move on. It's simply how the human mind processes what's left unfinished. It's the silent attempt to organize the emotional chaos that some words or the lack thereof leave behind. And everyone does it more than they admit, more than they'd like to, because there are things that time alone cannot resolve. There are conversations that end without conclusion, that leave loose ends, that demand revision. And the mind, in its need to understand, returns to them. It rewrites. It analyzes. Ite rears, not because you are stuck in the past, but because you are trying to make peace with it, trying to transform confusion into clarity, tension into relief, regret into learning, and perhaps most importantly, understand that you don't need to solve everything. Not every conversation needs a perfect ending. Not every sentence needs to be corrected. Not every silence needs to be deciphered. Sometimes what the mind is really looking for isn't the right answer, it's permission to stop searching, to accept that some things simply remain as they are, incomplete, imperfect, human. And when you finally manage to accept that, the repetition loses its power. The conversation stops echoing, and you realize you can move on, not because you've solved everything, but because you've learned to live with what hasn't been resolved. If you found something here that resonated with you, consider subscribing. There's more to explore about the quiet things we all do, but rarely talk about.